When it comes to getting a great lawn, you can use the right seed, the right fertiliser and the right lawnmower, but you can't control the rain. But I can now. Yes, the mission this week is to install pop-up sprinklers into my lawn. Now, this is a project that I've wanted to carry out for many years, ever since I first saw pop-up sprinklers abroad. And every year when it gets to June and July and the grass is dead because we've not had enough water, I kick myself for not doing this job earlier. So this year it's time to do it and make sure that my lawn stays nice and green throughout the whole summer. Now, I'm using a Hydrosure system here. This is a Hydrosure kit that comes with a dual zone controller and rotary pop-up sprinklers, and it comes with everything you need to install it in your garden. And I have to thank waterirrigation.co.uk for sending me this kit. They essentially sell all kinds of water irrigation, from normal hoses to soaker systems and drip systems, and even pop-up systems including Rainbird and everything else as well. So the kit is essentially a 1/2 inch tube that gets buried in the ground, lots of fittings, and these are just push fittings that just end up with a little clip here that keeps them nice and tight. And the system is run off a battery operated dual zone timer, which means that you can actually feed 2 different systems however you want to and however many times a day, per week or whatever. But it all comes down to the pop-up sprinkler. So you get 6 of these in this kit, and essentially they get buried up to the top, and then when the water pressure comes in, this section comes up and starts watering the grass. Now you get this special key to be able to adjust it. And I'll show you one of these sprinklers if I put this in. So this is the section that pops up when the water pressure comes on. So it's sitting about 100 mil above the grass at that point. And you've got a nozzle here. Rather than spraying in all directions at the same time, this is a rotary sprinkler, which means it will move from side to side and it will arc as far as you want it, anywhere between 40 degrees and 360 degrees. So as it goes around, you can see it moving like this. And this is completely adjustable as well. So with this key, if I just adjust this, rather than 40 degrees, we're now on to about 90. And then if I just adjust it a bit further, now we're rotating maybe 180 or whatever. So it's really easy to set up and place in your start point and your finish point as well. The other thing that these sprinklers have is that they have different nozzles that will release different amounts of water. That means that you can actually adjust the amount of water coming out of them and the throw as well. So you see this red nozzle that this sprinkler comes with. Each one comes with a whole selection of different sizes. Very easy just to take out that grub screw and replace it with a different nozzle. So even sprinklers on the same line, you can adjust for different throws, and maybe you can also adjust for pressure loss as well, because as water goes down the line, you're going to lose some pressure. So the one at the end, maybe you can have a larger nozzle to throw more out, and the one with the higher pressure at the beginning can be slightly smaller as well, so you can sort of balance them. So my plan is to install this system in 2 or 3 phases. The first phase over the next couple of days is to install the pipework and the pop-up sprinklers and get those working so I can at least water the grass, even though it's like manual and I might have to put a bit of effort into it. My garden is gradually changing shape, and as it does, I'll be able to then do the second and third phase, which will be installing the electronic timer system, so the different zones are watered without me having to put any effort in, and also installing a rainwater harvesting system with a tank so I can use some of the rainwater rather than clean water as well. But for the next couple of days, the main thing is get the pipe working, get the pop-up sprinklers in, and be able to at least water the grass, because it hasn't rained for literally weeks. So my first challenge is, because my lawn is a fair distance away from my water outlet point, I'm going to have a pressure loss in whatever pipe I use in between the two. And I know this time last year, when I used a standard sprinkler on the lawn through my 40-metre long hose, it wasn't overly effective just because of that pressure loss between the two. So what I'm going to do is temporarily set up my set of sprinklers just on steel pins on top of the lawn, with the pipe just running on the surface. I'm going to run it through the mains and see if I've got enough pressure for that to work. And only then will I know really whether I can run it off the mains directly, or whether I need to invest in a pump. All the fittings in this kit are push type fittings that have got a clip on them to hold them tight, except for these ones which are screwed into the bottom of each sprinkler, and they require PTFE tape just to stop any leakage. I find it easier to do all this in the workshop before I take it out into the garden. My first job is to lay out the 50-metre long hose, which after 10 or 20 minutes tends to flatten out in the sun, rather than staying coiled up like a spring all day. I use pipe cutters to cut the pipe to length, which fixes the distance between the sprinklers. Carrying out a job like this, pipe cutters are a great investment. They speed up every cut and you end up with a really clean perpendicular surface. I use some short steel pins just to fix the sprinklers roughly in the right position in the garden, and some gaffer tape to hold them onto each pin. Because they're laid out roughly where they're going to be installed, once I get them working properly, it will tell me whether the throw of 7 or 8 metres from each sprinkler, which I'm predicting, is actually going to cover the garden and soak every area. So I've got a bit of a temporary setup here. At the end of the hose, rather than running it back to the tap, I'm just using a short piece that I'm going to connect on to the other hose. And I've got one of these hose lock connectors that's actually got a valve at the end, so I can turn it on and off. So I've got water in there. Now this is the first test. I have no idea what's going to happen here. I doubt, to be honest with you, if I've even got enough pressure for the pop-up sprinklers to pop up, because those springs are really tight, and I've got 4 in a row, so I'm not feeling overly confident. And even if they do come up, I have no idea where they're aiming at the moment, but I've got this little key. Not really sure what to do with it, but I've got it anyway, so let's turn it on and see, shall we? Here we go. The water's running, but nothing's popping up. It's not what I call a success. So I'm not going to call it a failure, because it's only a trial, and actually what happened is exactly what I thought, which is actually we're just losing so much pressure that I haven't got enough pressure for these sprinklers to pop up. I've got a hose here that must be 40 metres long and only like 1/2 inch diameter, and then another 1/2 inch hose here that's another 25 metres long. So I think I'm going to have to resort to putting the whole system on a pump, which is what I thought I'd have to do. After it not raining for weeks on end, when I want to put in my irrigation system, when I finally come to install my pop-up sprinklers, the heavens open and I can't get into the garden. Can you believe that? You couldn't make this sort of stuff up. Anyway, it did allow me to go to the shops and pick up a pump, and I bought this one from Machine Mart. It's a Clark pump that's 1100 watts and should be big enough to do everything I want it to. I'll put a link in the description below. Now, I've just set it up. It's a bit Heath Robinson at the moment. I've got a tank full of water here that's supplying the water to the pump. And then the outlet, I've gone straight into this 1/2 inch thick outlet just to see if it works. So let me turn it on and I'll show you how the pop-up sprinklers are actually working. This is quite cool. So, that's what I call a resounding success. That's exactly how I expect to see the water coming through the pop-up sprinklers. And interestingly enough, because I'm feeding the pump through this water butt, I can calculate how long it takes me to fill through the hose and how long it takes me to discharge through the pump. And I conclude that this pump is putting out 3 times the amount of water that I'm actually getting through the hose. So no wonder it didn't work when I was just trying to feed it under mains pressure. And that's just a factor of the distance between the outside tap and where we are here. In a normal garden, you could may well get away with just using the mains pressure, but here I just can't. So the pump is working really well. The pop-up sprinklers are working really well. Now just becomes the difficult bit. That's digging the holes. This 1/2 inch pipe is small enough that you don't need to dig a full trench to bury it in your grass. I use a 1/2 moon turf cutter to persuade the top 4 to 5 inches of grass to open up wide enough to be able to insert the pipe. This is far easier than digging a trench, and the grass will recover and heal with this cut a lot quicker. Although this process is quite tiring, it is immensely satisfying to see the pipe push into the turf in a type of now you see me, now you don't way. After the pipe is in place, I can use a hand tamper to persuade the turf on each side back into its original position and end up with almost an invisible scar. Even when I was doing this with my slight Charlie Chaplin walk, I knew this would be a lot funnier, speeded up with some comical music. To make the holes for the sprinklers, I found that using my fence post digger was just the right diameter for a pop-up sprinkler. And if I cut 2 or 3 next to each other, then I could get the pipe underneath to sit nice and horizontal underneath the sprinkler. The first piece of turf that I cut, I put to one side, which I can use at the end to fill back around the sprinkler with grass. I'm having to stay a little bit further than I wanted to away from this path because the foundations of it come into the lawn and I can't dig through it. With the trench cut on either side of the hole, I can trim the pipe to length and fit the unit. Level wise, I'm aiming for the top of the sprinkler to be the same level as the bottom of the grass. I backfill the hole around the sprinkler in layers and compact it well with a piece of timber. And then at the top I add a touch of compost just to bring it up to level, and then put back some of the turf that I took out from the original hole to hide the installation as much as possible. Before testing it, I use a handful of lawn repair mix, that's 50% sand and 50% compost, which I just happen to have readily available because I've got it in because I'm coming up to some lawn levelling in the next week or so, just to fill around any small holes and even out the area the best I can. So there you go, 2 in, 6 to install. And now it's just a repetitive process of digging this very shallow trench and a few holes to put each sprinkler in and then just backfilling it. So while I carry on with this, go and see me in the garage. Well, I'll explain to you the theory of the layout of these sprinklers and why I came to the actual shape that I did. So before I did anything out in the garden, I actually drew a sketch of my garden so I could work out where the sprinklers were going to go. And this is essentially the section that I'm working on at the moment, which is 28 meters by 12. And knowing from the information given in the pack how far these sprinklers should throw at a certain pressure and rate, I worked out that I needed 4 either side, and then just drew the radiuses that show that everything overlaps, which means the whole garden should be covered by at least 1 sprinkler, if not 2. But I've actually got 2 systems here. I've got 4 here that will come on all together and 4 here that will come on all together, making the 2 systems. Both of them I'm trying to feed into the middle of this run of 4 to try to cut down on a pressure differential where 1 sprinkler has got a high pressure and at the end of the run is a low pressure. So you've got a difference between the sprinklers. I don't mind a little bit of that. I can adjust that with the nozzles, but I want to try to reduce it as much as possible. So good practice means if you can bring your incoming into the middle of a set of 4, then the pressure is going to be more equal than if it's coming in to the end as well. Now, the other thing that I'm going to install that comes with the kit are these valves that go on the end of the system. And what these do is it allows the system to drain when there's no pressure in the system. So when it is pressurized and working, these do nothing. They're just like a stop end. When the pressure comes off, there's a valve in here that opens automatically and actually allows the system to drain. That means that if you leave the whole system over winter with water in it, well, it's not going to freeze and burst the pipes because by the time it starts to freeze, the water is actually drained out. So these I'm going to put at the end of the 2 runs, here and here at the end of the system, which will allow it to drain. So if I do forget to flush it before the winter and there's water left in there, even when it freezes, it's not going to damage the pipe work. So that's the theory behind it. Let's go and see how I'm doing with the installation. So after quite a lot of digging and some swearing as well, all the sprinklers are in, everything's working. So have a look at this. Well, I must say that was a pretty long day or 2, but I'm glad I've got them finished and I've got them in. The only problem is the wind is playing absolute havoc with them at the moment. When they're trying to blow into wind, you haven't got a chance. So they're all over the place. So I can't really adjust them properly. I'm gonna have to wait until a calmer day, I think. Anyway, job done, and I'm glad I've got that in ready for the summer, so I can at least water the grass when I want to. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please check out the other ones on the channel and please subscribe. And please go and check out our Patreon page where there's additional content and additional weekly videos as well. I'm absolutely soaked. So until next week, I'll see you then.